So I talked to a rich dude I know, and he said that he loves to recruit losing congressional candidates to the nonprofits that he runs because he thinks that the folks who run are really talented. Often they lose, not because they're like not great candidates, but just because of various structural things.
Yeah.
And he thinks that the skill set lends itself very, very nicely to growing nonprofits.
Politics and nonprofits, we've learned firsthand, is like about the founder, right? And it falls around the person helps the narrative. I mean, if you can get critical mass, let's call it, more than 10 to 20% of the vote in some of these things, that's remarkable.
The party then becomes something that people will be like, oh, I should pay attention to this, because that's the way the American system works. It's like nobody cares unless you're a threat, unless you can be real. This week on Forward, big announcements, read the podcast, the January 6th hearings, politics versus nonprofits versus business. Should you surprise your significant other when you propose a career in comedy? So much to talk about this week on Forward. This is going to be the final Thursday episode of me and Zach for quite a while. When I say quite a while, the summer. We're looking at a summer hiatus. Just want to say first how much fun I've had hanging out with you, Zach, and for everyone who's been listening, really grateful, really appreciative. I hope you feel like you've been on this journey with us. So why are we not recording for much of the summer? Number one is that both Zach and I are going to be traveling a fair amount. And so if you're not in the same place, then what are we going to do? Like Zoom and be like, hey, like we'll shoot the shit over Zoom. It just didn't seem the same. But also we think that we could all use a little bit of a break over the summer. Like everyone needs a respite and a hiatus. Yep. Bigger picture, we have projects in the offing that may take us to periods where, frankly, we have full-time hands-on operating roles.
No offense, but we're going to have better shit to do than to talk to you.
No. I will never have better shit.
That's not true. But how about just talk? We've got stuff to do and not talk about. How about that?
Yeah, because at root, Zach and I are both operators, entrepreneurs, builders. Now, in my case, what I'm building first and foremost is the Forward Party, new political movement, which is growing by leaps and bounds. We're going to have exciting announcements for you. But in Zach's case, he might build an honest-to-God company that we'll have very exciting announcements for you on. But first, he has to go to the lab for a while and make this thing.
I hate people say they're working on a stealth company, like you're so special, you can't talk about it. But it is smart to keep it under wraps until we figure out how we're selling it and how the launches and things like that. So a few more months, but you guys will be honestly probably the first to know. So
we'll bring back Zach so we can talk about this exciting new company that he's working on that I will be more than cheering for. I mean, I'll be helping at every turn.
I force Andrew to stay involved in most of the stuff I do.
I mean, I can increase the chances of success of a lot of things. That's one of the fun things. So summer break. From the Andrew and Zach perspective, I know you've all been waiting for a so good. But bigger picture, me and Zach are still doing great things. We just have to go take the summer to go bake some stuff in the oven.
Back to the lab again. Yeah.
January 6th hearings.
Let's do January 6th. I'm not watching this shit. And I know I've watched a little bit on Twitter. I've quote followed a little bit on Twitter.
Yeah. I also have not been watching the bulk of the hearings. I've been getting like synthesis and news accounts and social media clips and whatnot. And so here's my take on it, writ large, but I think a lot of Americans are. So I'm in the camp that the insurrection was very, very serious and lives were lost. And people should be held accountable. I am also of the opinion that this set of hearings has become kind of this political theater that is not necessarily going to result in referrals to the Department of Justice or legal proceedings against various folks. And I think some of the committee members have even said as much, saying like, oh, it's not our job to refer. And the unfortunate thing is that there are a couple ways this could have gone. Number one is you have a lot of responsible Republicans raising their hands saying, hey, and you have a handful. I mean, you have like the leaders of the anti-Trump and I was about to say wing of the party, but it's not a wing. I mean, it's literally like it's Liz Cheney, it's Adam Kinzinger.
Mitt sometimes.
Occasionally someone else sticks their head in. I mean, like I do want to take a quick detour and say, look, there were 10 Republican House members who voted to impeach Trump. That number was apparently 35 just hours before the vote, but they all got death threats via text message. And then the number went from 35 to 30 to 25. And then even when it came down to the last 10, a lot of them weren't sure what they were going to do because they were all getting so much pressure not to vote that way. So then 10 did vote that way. And of those 10, 4 have retired, including Kinzinger. 1 just lost in South Carolina. So again, when you say like wing of the party, you're talking about at this point, there are literally only five House members. And that number could go down pretty quick over this next period of time. So you don't have a truly broad bipartisan approach to these hearings. It was run for TV by essentially the Democratic Party. And so to me, like the single biggest question is like, will there be legal proceedings against various figures? Do I personally think that there should be legal accountability? Yes, I do. Like, you don't need to convince me of this stuff. Like, I know it was messed up. The thing you need to convince me of is there going to be real accountability, or are you just trying to make your case for public consumption?
The left in particular, while Trump was president and since he's left, you'd watch an MSNBC or CNN piece and they're like, this is the bombshell that'll turn the tide against Trump. This is the thing they don't want you to see. This is going to change everything. And they've said that over and over. We've all seen it for one thing or another, whether it's XYZ whistleblower or this, and nothing has ever happened.
The big thing was the Mueller report.
The Mueller report. Yeah, that's a great one.
It's freaking weeks or months of build-up. Yeah, it was.
And literally a nothing burger. And it's over and over a nothing burger. And it's not like nothing that there wasn't anything wrong. It's just that these don't turn into actual prosecutions. Now let me ask you, is that because the wrongdoings are not that bad, or is that, look, politics governing is messy, anything you do on the right over here is stuff that the left is doing too, so if you actually prosecute me, we're going to flip the script right back on you as soon as we're back in power, and no one wants to open that can of worms?
Well, I think that you have a degree of just institutional weakness where if there was, let's say, political consensus, let's imagine a world where the Republicans had joined hands and said, hey, Trump, this is beyond the pale. You need to be held accountable.
Right.
And then everyone was rallying around DOJ prosecutions.
Pence or
whatever. And the rest of it.
Yeah.
Would it happen in that world? Yeah, I think it would. The world we're in right now is that you have a deeply divided government. And so then the Democrats feel like, hey, if we bring this, it's going to be decried as a partisan hack job. Certainly Trump's going to say that.
Right.
And then it becomes a much more difficult choice for the various officials. And so you would need a set of officials with certain disposition, certain, frankly, courage. And I feel like that's kind of lacking. They're much more likely to say this falls into a gray area and let it go. Yep. And then things fall into, again, this political realm where certain people think like, oh, it wasn't that serious, and then others think that people should be, like sent to jail for it.
Right. So yet again, we'll have a whole bunch of resources, time, money, energy, people fundraising around this.
Well, I'll tell
with
you,
no
when I
results.
talk about Donald Trump running for president again, like a lot of Democrats look at me and say, hey, like, but won't he be in jail by then? Won't he be indicted by then? And I'm just like, well, I'll believe it when I see it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
people have been talking about this for freaking ever.
Since before he was running, since he was the nominee. You know, the best, let's call it non-clickbait case I've seen has been, frankly, like tax evasion, tax fraud in
New York. Yeah.
New York City.
That stuff's legit.
That's how they got Capone, if you will. They didn't get him for actual crimes in that sense and murders and things like that. They got him for tax evasion. So maybe, but I'm with you, man. Like, it's our system's crumbling. It's not really working. There's a lot of forces working against it. I wanted to bring this up because, one, if you're on the left and you're getting, let's call it Democratic leaning or highly fueled messaging, you're seeing all these hearings over and over and being told Trump's on his last rope and X, Y, Z. And if you're on the right, you're probably not seeing this at all. Like Fox is barely covering it. And they're not even the far right anymore. Let's call it, the other, like your Daily Wires and Breitbarts and further right. They're not touching it, right? So the reality is we probably get nothing, It's probably a lot of
Again, for me, it's like I will believe it when the legal proceedings are brought to bear, and until then, I'm just like, wake me up until
let me know it's real.
Yeah.
What are you sleeping on right now? Seriously, I want you to think about it because I used to not give any time or thought to my mattress, and then I got a Helix mattress. And I'm telling you this, it's freaking remarkable. Helix mattresses, some of the most comfortable mattresses on the market, and they're fantastic. So how it works is Helix Sleep has a quiz that just takes about 2 minutes to complete. It matches your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress for you. So why would you buy a mattress made for someone else? Get one made for you. And with Helix, you're getting a mattress that will be the perfect way for you to sleep. Everybody's unique. Helix knows that. So there's lots of different mattresses and models to choose from. So I got one that's like medium firmness because I sleep on my side all the time. It's perfect for me. Cannot complain, and my brother, who's just casually sleeping over, loves it as well. This mattress is freaking gold. But you don't have to take my word for it. It's been awarded the #1 best overall mattress pick of 2020 by GQ and Wired Magazine. All you have to do is go to helixsleep.com/yang. Take their 2-minute sleep quiz, and they'll match you to a customized mattress that will give you the best sleep of your life for real. They have a 10-year warranty, and you get to try it out for 100 nights risk-free. So Helix right now is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows, and they're lovely, for our listeners. That's helixsleep.com/yang, helixsleep.com/yang.
We don't always have to talk about Elon Musk on this podcast, but he said something I think a lot of people are thinking, but we haven't really talked about really since he ran for maybe mayor a bit. I think he talked about it, but a bit on the presidential race, was TikTok. And he said it's essentially destroying civilization. We have a lot of young people spending a lot of time and energy, and it's not like a small subset. It's a lot. You have kids that are getting closer.
It's the
closer to that
#1
age.
platform.
Spending a lot of time and energy focused on TikTok. What are the consequences of that for this generation? Is it as bad as people say they are, or are we overblown, talking, the kids are, this is old people complaining about the kids. Is it that bad, or is it overblown?
TikTok is a very, very addictive place to be. I'm on TikTok. I don't sit there and scroll on TikTok very often. But when I do, it's hypnotic.
Yeah.
So what I see is like kids just going into TikTok consumption mode and just tuning out, and you're just like hypnotized by music and typically young people and catchy videos, and they're short. And then even if you're not loving it, like the next video starts. So what does this mean in terms of young people? I'm a parent. I've got 2 kids, and the main thing I want my kids to do is read books, and it's not really happening. For them, they'd much rather play a quick video game or whatnot. So TikTok to me is an extension of that. It's that you have consumption habits and attention span durations that are going to shift in a particular way.
Well, I mean, like TikTok, a couple things that I don't love about it, and it's social media in general, but TikTok's like seems to be the pinnacle so far, where you don't have to connect with the people around you. Like you could have no friends around you, but millions of people following you on the app and feel like you get that positive connection and dopamine from millions, but actually have no friends. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think it prioritizes like short-term gains, like doing something for like a click or a like. And if it's the marshmallow test, right, where delayed gratification is one of the biggest indicators of successful people. And I feel like this cuts strongly in the opposite direction. So I worry about the impact of that. And I also worry about these kids like spending a lot of time and energy and resources in something that really isn't doing much. It's adding, I guess, maybe sparks of joy, but it's not really adding much value except distraction. So I worry about that, and how if I was a kid, that'd be shaping my mind and my social scene.
Well, we're rewiring kids' brains in myriad ways, and TikTok is the latest progression. My running joke is that I'm going to start a $1 billion app to replace TikTok, and it's going to be called Tick. And the maximum video length is 1 second.
Ooh.
So watch out, TikTok. Tick is coming.
Yang's coming for you.
All right, man. So we have been recording these convos since October. So it's approximately 9 months or so.
You mean in the studio?
In the studio.
Yeah.
You and me.
Yep.
So in that time, you've had some major life events. You've gotten engaged to be married.
Yep.
You've become a published author.
That's true. It's been a fun 9 months or whatever the timing is.
You and I have traveled to Miami and Austin together.
That's a travel. Well, L.A., right?
We were in L.A. What are your favorite memories of the last 9 months? It can be in the podcast or outside the podcast. Aside from, we can talk about getting engaged and becoming an author.
So that was great.
Were you sure she was going to say yes?
I was sure she was going to say yes.
Nice.
Which is good. I highly recommend that, folks. If you're going to propose to someone, talk about it beforehand.
No, dude. Like, so I proposed to Evelyn.
You were not sure, right?
I proposed to Evelyn, and here was the only bar I set for myself was that she has to not know it's coming.
Okay.
And so I genuinely surprised the shit out of her.
That's good.
Like really like kind of speechless kind of thing. And then her response at verbatim was, "Why are you doing this?"
Really? Maybe we talked about that before.
Yeah, 5 words.
Fucking
5 words you don't want to hear when you're proposing, honestly.
No, you don't want to hear anything but yes.
Yeah.
Carly said, of course, which wasn't yes, but
that's pretty good, man. Of course, it's freaking dope.
It just wasn't the word. You're just hoping for yes, right? Anyway.
What you're not hoping for is why you're doing this. Eventually, we got to yes, but this was one of the costs to my surprising her. And I had packed the wedding ring, and I had a little cartoon to propose. We went to a Caribbean island, but she genuinely didn't see it coming. Like Evelyn and I had this running joke where she said, "Why are you doing this?" Because she was like, "I'm like too young," and at the time she was not that young. I mean, she was like a fine marriageable age. It was not like a child bride situation. I mean, she was 28 at the time of proposal.
That's young. That's a good age.
So she said yes, and then celebrations ensued. So that would probably be a fond memory number 1 of the last 9 months for you. Like what else is in there?
Related to the podcast, I loved our conversations on boys and men. I loved your conversation with John McWhorter. I thought that was good on woke racism. But yeah, the boys and men stuff I think was the most eye-opening. And then the other thing I'll say that I don't think I've talked about in this podcast, but I've been trying to we haven't been able to get him on, maybe we will, but this guy James Clear wrote a book called Atomic Habits, and that book has changed my life. Atomic Habits by James Clear. I've been trying to break a couple habits. I've been snoozing too much. I haven't been working out as much as I wanted, and the third one is I bite my nails. I'm trying to get rid of that. And there's a book called The Power Habit, very popular, and he takes that one step further, and it's very, very tactical, which I like. And so I'm not perfect, but the book is dynamite. So that has been honestly a game changer, like a different perspective on life. And it's rare I read a book where it's shapes like that. So that's probably the stuff for me outside of life events.
I'm continuously tweeting out my conversation with Barbara Walter about how civil wars start, in part because civil war is trending on Twitter every fourth day, and then I'm like,
God, Twitter.
Which, by the way, so there was a period when only conservatives were allowed to talk about civil war, and then liberals were like, oh, by talking about that, you're, awful. I don't know if you knew that was a thing.
I didn't. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but I didn't.
Yeah, no, the liberals were like, by talking about civil war, you are like,
causing it.
Yeah, you're causing it, and you're terrible.
Your words are evil.
And then now liberals are like, hey, civil war is on the table. And Barbara Walter was one of the reasons for this. There were two authors, Stephen Marsh and Barbara Walter. So Stephen Marsh's book was The Next Civil War, and Barbara Walter's How Civil Wars Start. So they're kind of companion books. Barbara Walter had the advantage of being like a PhD in political science, where she like unpacked all of the trends, and she went on studying them internationally. So that framework I found to be very, very helpful. John McWhorter certainly, I mean, that dude, to the extent that there is someone who explained the problem of kind of the wokeness thing, John McWhorter is the man. He like spelled it out for me in a particular way. And the most controversial thing he said was that he compared it to a religion, and that is like a religious kind of disposition, and if you question it, and he said, it's like, look, you don't try and like convert someone out of a religion, like you just try and work around them. And I thought that was highly interesting. Different people but someone else called it also the religious left. So you're right, that was a highly powerful convo. During this time, I've been running around trying to build a forward party. And the forward party, I'm happy to say, is going to have some really exciting announcements later this summer. But we're on the verge of being the third biggest political party in the country by resources within a year of founding, which I'm super excited about.
Yep.
And it was all because of this podcast, I know. No, I mean, the podcast.
Podcast helped.
I'm sure, I'm sure it did help. The Boys and Men convo I'm particularly proud of. I think I mentioned that the op-ed I wrote in the Washington Post is now going to be taught in AP English in classrooms around the country as part of like an English textbook.
That stuff does warm my heart. There's some stuff you've done, and even I've done. Like I've had a couple people mention me, like I've had a professor who's like, I'm going to teach some of the stuff in your book, and in my book, and then your book for sure. I get a lot more of those, and your War on Normal People book. So academia is going a different, especially higher academia is going a different, higher ed's going a different direction. But there are some pockets of hope, I'd say, in terms of people studying what we're talking about a little bit, which is good.
Study long shot, study forward.
I think it's a good book if you're running for office. I was talking to Jen Perlman, remember her from Florida?
Oh yeah, of course.
It was on her podcast, Generational Change, and I like the way she ran. She raised a ton of money. She got a good number of votes. She got like 27% of the vote in that primary, which is really impressive for a first-time candidate.
Yep.
Against
Jen Perlman's great.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Debbie, less great. Continue.
yeah, she said a lot of her votes were because everybody hates her so much. She's like, as running a candidate, like my book talks about, like the problems we had were problems that a lot of people have across the country. They're running for the first time. That does bring me hope that there are people who take kind of what we say seriously, even though we're not always the most serious at times, and but also in the midst of a lot of nonsense going on,
So I talked to a rich dude I know, and he said that he loves to recruit losing congressional candidates to the nonprofits that he runs, because he thinks that the folks who run are really talented. Often they lose, not because they're like not great candidates, but just because of various structural things.
Yeah.
And he thinks that the skill set lends itself very, very nicely to growing nonprofits.
I'd argue it lends itself to a lot of things. Like if you can run with your head held high and outperform what you're expected, which is essentially zero, right? If you can get critical mass, let's call it, more than 10 to 20% of the vote and some of these things. And that's remarkable. You can raise a certain amount of money. So the hustle and drive and leadership and resilience and scrappiness, like those things translate almost any industry, right? But I agree, like the nonprofit sector would help a lot because you're always doing more with less and being told no a lot.
Well, so check it out. It can go both directions. So I ran a nonprofit for 6.5 years that you supported.
Yeah.
You started a nonprofit.
It's not a fun game.
The podcast on Monday was with Daniel Lubetsky, who
Mm-hmm.
ran a combo for-profit, nonprofit, Peaceworks for 10 years.
Yep.
And I don't know if you heard on the podcast, but he was like, hey, this thing was hand to mouth for 10 years. We were, budget of $2 million, $3 million. Then he starts Kind, and it just takes off like a rocket, more or less. And then now it's, a multi-billion-dollar business. And so there's something about, like, I ran a nonprofit, and, like, it's very difficult for nonprofits to grow past a certain point. Like the management acumen necessary to develop and grow an org is really significant. And a friend of mine said it to me best. He said, nonprofits run on passion.
Yeah.
So you're typically very passionate about the cause and the org. And so in my case, run nonprofit for 6.5 years, conclude that the problems are too big for my nonprofit to ever really solve. And so it's like, well, how could you solve them? Reorganize the economy. How do you do that? Run for president. What are the rules of running for president, et cetera, et cetera. So I have seen people go from pissed off nonprofit founder to political candidate because they're like, hey, like these problems are too big for my nonprofit to address. The other direction, so this is one of the fundamental issues that we have in life, and this is something I struggle with personally. I think even you struggle with. So check it out. CEO of private company where your life is normal, you talk every once in a while, but it's not your main jam, like nonprofit, you run something, but you also have to go around and sell people, raise money, do a bunch of stuff.
Yes.
And then political candidate, it's like all of your stuff is external facing and you're like barely an operator at all.
Right.
Now, the problem that happens to us is that if you have someone who's in the political game for too long, and then you say, hey, like you're not going to be doing politics anymore because you lost your seat.
Right.
Half of them right now become lobbyists because it's like, okay, I've got these relationships, like this marketability in a particular way, but like now I don't know how to run shit. you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not like I mean, this is
especially with tech now, like the software platforms you're using to run an organization change every 3 to 5 years, right?
So and by the way, the average member of Congress is 58, Senator 64. So if you're like losing a race and you come out and you're like a 50-something-year-old and
like,
someone
now
will
log
pay
into
you,
our Team Slack account, like you're toast.
if someone's going to pay you $500,000 to call you old friends and cajole them into taking meetings, it's like, that seems like a better gig than
learning how to use Monday or you're learning how to use one of these project management tools that all the startups use. Yeah.
So one of the issues is that the political thing, and this is one reason why you are heading to industry in the way that you are, which is, by the way, going to be very wholesome and very entrepreneurial and very scrappy and the rest of it. But you see that if you go too deep down this road, you're like, oh shit, like I'm not going to be an operator anymore.
Correct.
I'm going to be like a talking head communicator person who then, and there's a market for that, but the market, is not as good, frankly, as if you can run shit and you're like a genuine executive.
You've learned that too because you've gone in the political game, like in like the field of, let's call it democracy reform, right? And there's a lot of people who nameless, but they look good on a website or on a panel or XYZ, but when you actually try and get them to do anything, they're not that helpful. They have some connections, but it's really they can get coffee with some people. They can't get resources at the table. They can't operate effectively. They can't market effectively. It's just, completely agree. The other thing is, like, one of my biggest learnings when I was running a nonprofit was how much, like, there's the good idea, right? The innovation. And I thought that would carry the day. And there's so much more of like people's mentalities and perceptions and other things that get in the way. Like one of the biggest things I was told when I first started Suit Up was like I had other nonprofit folks be like, we don't need more education nonprofits. Like, please stop. And I was like, I think you missed the point. My goal is to the reason I wanted to start it is not because we need more of these, correct, but we can actually unlock actual money into this nonprofit space, which you guys are all fighting for and don't do it very well. But I mean, I think I learned that when we ran for office. I learned that we ran a nonprofit where it's not just the innovation. Like Venture for America, wonderful idea. Your issues were people and hesitations and like getting buy-in and approval, and it wasn't just, you couldn't just have a smart idea and win the day. You had to do a lot more
this
around
is
it.
what your friend Mike Tarullo said to me that actually pushed me in a certain direction. Mike Tarullo, you got me to run for president of the United States without even knowing it, and here's how. So I'm hanging out in Venture for America HQ with Mike Tarullo, who's a schoolmate of Zach's back in the day.
And he was your COO? He's like your
COO
head
type.
guy type, yeah.
And so I get asked to speak at a conference, and I'm like, is my speaking at this conference really going to help us? And then what Mike said to me was, it was Andrew, for Venture for America to get to here, you have to be up here. It's like, for Venture for America to become a thing, Andrew Yang has to become a thing.
Yes.
And so when Mike said that, I thought, wow, he might be right. But also hearing from my team that it was better for them for me to go to some conference and spend a couple of days away because like that helps us achieve our goals was like permission. I felt like kind of a dick being like, hey, I'm going to go jerk it at this conference for a couple of days. You guys like do your thing. But then when he was saying like,
no, that helps us.
No, that helps us. Like you're trying to elevate your profile is good for this organization. And generally speaking, he's right, because you needed someone to hook an idea onto. And despite learning that over 6 years at Venture for America, I still wanted to not build the presidential campaign around Andrew Yang, in part because I was running for president and that was kind of rash. But it was named UBI 2020 initially.
Yeah, the first name of the campaign was UBI 2020. I was like, I don't think it works.
Yeah, it's like,
but
we
did have logos,
UBI
UBI 2020.
Yeah, so Zach can vouch for this. And so then we tested it, and then Yang 2020 came back much better. But again, even the fact that I had to make a decision on that meant that I really had not learned my lesson. Like I already learned this lesson, and then I needed to relearn it again because like I still wanted the ideas to lead. I like naturally want the ideas to lead, but like it's not even with a forward party, it's like the idea is spot on. It's like, hey, it's major third party. Like we all know we need it. 62% of Americans want it, like,
right.
et cetera, et cetera. But then everyone still is like, oh, Andrew Yang. Let's say I was some no-name that could not credibly run for president and get, last I checked, something like 5 to 10% of the vote. Then you know what you would think about the forward party? Absolutely nothing, because you never would have heard of it. Just because, there are half a dozen other of these little parties that got started by people you've never heard of.
Yeah.
And you never will hear of. So the fact that I'm someone who could credibly launch a run and change the math
means you probably should.
No, means that that the party then becomes something that people will be like, oh, I should pay attention to this, because that's the way the American system works. Is like nobody cares unless you're a threat, unless you can be real. And so in my case, it's like, so one of the ironic things too is like if I would just run around with my hand up in the air and a Bible in the other being like, I will not run for president, like da-da-da-da-da, no one would believe me anyway. You know what I mean?
That's
there's
so
like,
true.
there's
nothing you can say.
nothing to be said. Like, it's like, so as it is, and like God's honest truth, like I have no idea what I'm going to do. And I'm like, just like open-minded about like, just trying to help the country. So
right.
like if it felt like it'd be good for the country, I'd like, do what I could. If getting behind someone else is, the way, which my instinct is that it's probably going to be supporting the party, whatever that means. We're having someone on the podcast next week who he's definitively talking about running for president on a third party ticket.
Right.
So, that like there are people that I'm talking to that seem pretty excellent.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. So
my number one draft pick, people probably know, is Mark Cuban. So that is what it is.
I think he's a good pick. Let me ask you this. So politics and nonprofits, we've learned firsthand, is like about the founder, right? And it falls around the person helps the narrative. But But you said this, I think you said this on the trail a few times. I want to dive in. It's like, if you're a CEO of a for-profit company, you're out there trying to get as much press and awareness and build up your own profile. Usually that makes you a terrible CEO.
Your company's going to shit.
And that's
9 times out of 10.
Is that is the difference because some of these nonprofits and political candidates aren't actually doing anything? They're just kind of moving shit around. And because when you're running a business, you actually have to do something and make the numbers work.
All right, here's the thing, and I've now been this in a couple of different capacities. So when I was running for president, the highest use I could have is to do press and chase coverage and do things that drive energy, because the enemy is oblivion, really. You know, like you have to be...
The enemy is irrelevance, oblivion.
Yeah. So now in a company's perspective, in theory, the company is delivering something of value. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing that and it's significant enough, then you could spend all of your time honing operations and trying to get your value proposition better and managing your team and organization. And that would be a much better use of your time than press that might result in growth.
Sure. You can be oblivious and make money in companies, if you will.
Now there are some companies that go into growth mode where then, and the one that jumps in my mind for whatever reason is WeWork.
Yeah.
Where it, when a company goes into expansion mode and then you're just like running around trying to, in their case it was raise money.
Yeah.
But it can be that sometimes you're raising awareness, and this is something that I have done for political campaigns, sort of did for organizations, and so you do what the organization needs, and if your company is operating well, then what it needs is for you to mind the operations.
Right.
Go in. I mean, you can have a great COO. I mean, like that would be phenomenal.
That's so true. You could run suit-ups operations fantastically. It doesn't always move the needle. Sometimes, on the presidential, not at all. Realistically.
Yeah, if you sat there and like got your team running like a well-oiled machine, but like there was no press coming in and no like the rest of it, then your campaign dies.
You're done. Yeah.
What's funny too, Zach, is that you remember this about me. It's like if someone asked me what was the happiest time in my life professionally, it was like categorically, just like anonymously running a private company. Like life made sense. It was great. I met Evelyn during that time. We were dating, just yucking it up.
Yep.
I could make decisions to do something, and it would be, just frankly, it happened the next day, and it was done. I mean, I look back fondly on my time running Venture for America, but it was a very difficult job.
Yes.
Really proud of it. I look back fondly on my time running for president, but wow, that was like,
fucking hard.
That was hard.
Forward Party's not easy.
Forward Party.
The podcast is fun.
The podcast
we're not
is
particularly
fun.
great at it though. We're like, I appreciate you guys listening, but we're not the next Joe Rogan podcast.
I mean, so Zach's been a real anchor on my brilliance. So I've been asked to give a couple commencement speeches, so I've been thinking about guidance for the next generation. I gave commencement address at Columbia Law School, where I graduated from.
Yeah.
And did you see it?
I did.
So I tried to thread the needle between being serious and inspirational and funny, because I don't know. It was like it just did not seem. And I confess, when I was there, I was like, oh shit, like do I have to play this straight, or am I gonna stick to trying to be funny? So
you're usually better when you try and be funny.
Oh, thank you, man.
Yeah.
So I'm considering, and people online can like talk to me about this, but I'm considering leaning into the humor, in part because I feel like America needs some levity because things are fucking depressing.
I would support the Andrew Yang stand-up career.
Dude, I have half a dozen standing offers from various clubs in New York just to show up and do like surprise sets.
Work on a bit.
I mean, like I'm.
There's a market for political humor, because a lot of people. You can't talk about politics anywhere else. I went to a cocktail party this weekend, housewarming party, and we were talking about politics. We were talking about DeSantis, and I said something. I don't love DeSantis. I think there's some stuff he's done that's pretty awful, but in Florida, he has bumped the minimum wage, which I think is objectively a good thing. And as a Democrat, people Democrats like that. And he's put, $400+ million into fighting climate change in Florida, also a good thing. And I mentioned that, and it was as if I was the root of all evil. I regretted it immediately. It was awful. And we can't talk about that stuff anymore. We used to be able to, within reason. So,
wow, man, those are some too many facts on your side there.
It was dark. I was like, why do people like this? Why is DeSantis most popular governor in the country, give or take? Especially amongst moderates, not just the right. And I'm like, why? So I was just looking into why, and that's
and you found some stuff.
Things. Yeah. Anyway,
so
if you can help people talk about politics.
So you'd say lean into the humor.
Please.
I'm considering doing so. But I was also asked to speak at the commencement for Stuyvesant High School.
Yeah.
And I have determined that I need to be serious for that one.
Oh.
So I am
why?
heading down. It's a fair question. For whatever reason, I thought poking fun at the law school grads. It's like, who cares? They're like adults and the rest of it. But then for these high school kids, like it just feels like a more serious occasion for some reason. I have no idea why.
That's fair.
Part of it too is that I didn't go to Stuyvesant, whereas I did go to Columbia, so I could speak very directly to the Columbia experience in a way that I could poke fun at.
Also, high schoolers aren't going to know that they're allowed to. I don't think they're going to feeling like they're not going to be there, ready to laugh. Right? It's a serious moment for them. There's a serious person there. Right? I think the vibe's going to be serious. It's going to be a tough crowd for laughs. I think
it's going to be a tough crowd for laughs. It's going to be like 4,000 or 5,000 people in an outdoor stadium too. So.
You're not going to get that. Like, if you go to a college graduation ceremony, they're expecting an opening joke or two.
Right.
That's expected. Because you did, right? So I'm saying, but this one for high school.
I joked half the way through that thing.
No, you did an opening joke, I thought.
So I'm going to try and keep it real, because one of my rules in this sort of occasion is to keep it honest. I hope that people feel like we've done that here on the pod, and that. No, I will say, Zach, and you'll be back with like an announcement about the company and like back, when we're back in session. Yeah. But I've really enjoyed these conversations with you, man. I've looked forward to them. I hope that people have found value in them. And yeah, I mean, we'll be back, but if not in the same format, but like that there's something too about like the need to constantly evolve and do things that frankly, like work for people at different stages. So people for me, I think you sense that, like I'm very, very deeply invested into trying to push American democracy in a positive direction. I feel like I've got an eye on it, a beat on it, and a read on it, and can contribute a ton of value. And so, stay tuned. I'll be podcasting throughout the summer on Mondays, generally interviewing various authors and subjects that I'm excited about, as per usual. And then Thursdays, we're going to be back after the summer in some form, probably. It might not be Zach. It might be some more Jules, might be different things. But this era has been a lot of fun, man. The last 9 months have been great.
I saw this quote the other day, and it was it hit me, or it stuck with me a bit. It's cheesy, but I'll say it anyway. I think it was Audrey Hepburn attributed the quote. It said, "The best thing in life to hold on to is each other." And I'd say that's my advice. That's my parting thoughts, guys. As you go and life gets crazier and crazier, and we watch the decline of the empire, hang on to the folks you love, the folks that are some ways, like whether it's blood or relatives or best friends that are required to stick with you through it all. Those are the ones to get closer to in times like this. So that's my advice, man. It's been wild. It's been fun.
You hear what Zach just said, everyone. He said propose to that significant other.
Do it.
That you've been thinking about. Hold her tight.
Yeah.
Don't let her go. Make her say to you, why are you doing this? And then cave in and say yes, the way Evelyn did. For me, 12 plus years ago, still married to this day, 2 kids. She can't go anywhere. I can't go anywhere. It's the way life ought to be.
We're stuck. And last parting thoughts, congratulations, Jermaine Johnson won his local race in South Carolina, kept his seat. they changed the districts up, so he had a bit of a fight there.
Oh, he had to run against an incumbent. Congrats, Jermaine.
You're the man, Jermaine. We love you. We love you guys. We'll be back soon.
Have a great summer, everyone. Watch some The Boys.